That working? Good morning. Good morning. Hello. We're going to make a start. Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard Anderson. I'm the chair at Independent Age, and it's really nice to see so many of you here today for what I think will be a really engaging day. This is our second annual conference, and I think it's going to be even better than last year's, which was really good. So we feel like we're on the beginning of a really nice event in the middle of each year to focus on this subject. But for those of you who don't know Independent Age, we're a national charity focused on improving the lives of older people in financial hardship across the UK. And we do this by trying to increase the money people on lower incomes receive, to reduce the costs that they face, and ensure that their housing is affordable and safe. To achieve this, we provide direct services, information through our website and printed booklets. We give out grants to community organisations, and we use the evidence we gain from both of these interventions to work out what the key systemic problems are that cause and exacerbate poverty in later life, and we campaign to change them. But I wanted to start by sharing a little context of the situation people on low income in later life are facing right now. National data shows that there are 2 million older people living in poverty and a further million hovering just above it, dipping in and out through the year, often just one unexpected bill away from not being able to have enough money to live on. So we know there are some groups that are more likely to experience poverty in later life, and these are the groups we're particularly concerned about. They include private renters, women, people with long-term conditions and disabilities, one-person households, people from racially minoritized groups, and unpaid carers. And of course, many people associate with several of those groups, not just one. It's also important to say that there are many reasons why people can find themselves in poverty at any age. For the people we speak to in older age, as they can often be in poverty after a relationship breakdown or a bereavement. They may have worked all their lives, but in low-paid or insecure work. They may have had caring responsibilities or family members they needed to take care of, meaning they had to reduce their working hours or stop work entirely. Or they may have had a health condition themselves which affected their ability to work. The calls that our advisors at Independent Age field every day are from people in really difficult situations in their 70s, 80s, 90s, telling us that they can no longer justify the cost of using their cooker, they're eating cold food, or doing their laundry when they're suffering from a health condition that requires fresh bedding, fresh clothes. Some people are even turning their fridges off overnight to save money. Now, this isn't acceptable, and we want to work with all of you so that each of us can play a part in tackling poverty in older age. Together we can make a difference. I'm sure many of you will have seen the news last week that the UK government has changed its mind on who should receive winter fuel payment and decided that more people need it. This is something we've been campaigning on since last July, alongside many of you in this room, and we're pleased the government has listened and acted. However, while we celebrate this positive step, we know in reality that for many older people, they were facing financial hardship before the winter fuel payment was removed and will continue to experience it once it is restored. So that's why it's so essential that we all keep going and working together to ensure that poverty is tackled and that no one experiences financial hardship in later life. So now we're going to play a short video to convey just how much has happened over the last year. And then I'll be asking Independent Age's Chief Executive, Joanna Elson, who will say a little more about the purpose of today and some housekeeping points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gosh, what a lot has happened in the last year. Thank you so much for all of your support and help as we've been working with you to end poverty in later life. We enjoyed last year's conference so much and we learnt such a lot that we wanted to do it again. We've got a great day lined up with a mixture of panels, discussions, networking opportunities. Hopefully you'll be inspired, as we've been, by what you hear and want to take action, or for many of you, continue to take action. During the breaks and lunch, we have a board in the hall opposite where you can pledge what you'd like to do to tackle these issues. We also have a QR code available on the screens that will take you to our website with a range of ways that you can get involved and show your support. One of those pledges might be to share the stories of people experiencing financial hardship or advocate for changes that can help. And you can do that today by having your photograph taken at the photo wall, which is just on the left-hand side as you go out of those doors, and then do share that on your social media channels. And then for the panel sessions, we'll really welcome your input. You can either just put your hand up in the old-fashioned way, or you can use the QR code to make sure you get to Slido, and that will put the questions up for the panels. A couple of very practical points. If you need the toilet, there are some available on this floor. There are signs, or do ask somebody. Independent age colleagues have got a green lanyard, so you'll spot them. There's no fire alarm planned for today, so if you do hear the fire alarm, do leave by the nearest exit. People will be helping you with that. So let's get cracking. One of the most popular slots at last year's conference was our lived experience panel, so we're starting with that today. I'm really delighted that we've got such an amazing panel, and we're honoured to have Bola Masuru facilitating that for us today. Some of you will know Bola's voice. For many years she was on the BBC World Service, and I certainly enjoyed hearing her lovely voice. And she's now an independent filmmaker who's made some amazing documentaries. Do check them out if you haven't seen them. So over to you, Bola. Thank you very much to you and the panel.
You want to get closer? Okay. I think your dress is. Should I just hold your dress for you? That way out, I think. Should I just hold that? Good.
We got you. Well done.
Legs are not good today. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got the chair on.
Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I just get my pen. Hello, everyone, and it's wonderful to be here today, this morning, to be facilitating the panel and facilitating the discussion with these three wonderful women who have extremely important stories and experiences to share. I'm Bola Masuru, so as Joanna kindly said, I'm a broadcaster. And one of the things that I think I found the most touching in my 30-odd career is hearing personal stories and amplifying stories that really matter. And I think this panel is one that I think will do that, not just for me, but for all of us. And hopefully we will, as Richard said, be able to learn some lessons and take issues forward, because I think this is not just a listening platform, it's also to find solutions. So hopefully some of them may be proffered by Yvonne, Khadija, and Jo. Yvonne has come all the way from Oxfordshire, and I think we really need to give her a round of applause because she's had a trying she's had a trying morning, coming all the way from Oxfordshire in a car, which you would have thought would have been quicker, but then she was held in London traffic, which, as we know, is awful. And so thank you very much, Yvonne. Sorry that you had, such a tumultuous way in. Khadija is the CEO of the Shama Women's Centre in Leicester, and she has a large cohort of people, it's intergenerational, isn't it? But a large proportion are elderly. And Jo is one of Independent Age's workers, members, who also mans the ever so important helpline that helps so many thousands of older people who, I mean, you'll probably tell me the figure is not even hundreds of thousands, but might be even more, who are struggling, who are facing these challenges. So we'll have a discussion. The format will be that we'll hear from each of the panelists, but then after I've asked a few questions, it would really be helpful if you also pose questions yourselves. If you have any, as Joanna said, you can either use the Slido or put your hand up. My eyesight isn't that terrible, but if I do miss you and your question hasn't come up on Slido, do alert somebody on the side, especially if you haven't seen your question or it hasn't been asked, so that we can put that to the panel. So without further ado, can I start with you, Yvonne, if you don't mind saying a few words about yourself, just to introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Hi, my name's Yvonne. As you can see, I'm a proper diva. I like to fall up the stage rather than walk up like normal people. I'm soon to be 80 years old, and I've been a volunteer with Independent Age for around 4 years now. I live in Oxfordshire. I live on my own. I do find life difficult at times, not only financially, but physically, and also loneliness. Loneliness is a big thing, especially when you get older and you live on your own. And if, like me, you're slightly incapacitated, not from having gin on my cornflakes, I might add, life can be very isolating. So the fact that you've got a very limited income to live on, you've got all these bills to pay, and my annoyance is more than anything how they're saying, the interest rate is not rising, things are coming down. No, they're not. Come and shop in my shops. I went yesterday to get some shopping, just a simple thing, and a dozen eggs were 25 pence dearer than they were last week. I mean, how can they justify that? And I thought back, and like I would say 3 years ago, I was paying probably about £1.60 for a dozen eggs, £3.25 yesterday. So how can they tell us on a fixed income that we have enough to live on, that prices are not rising, and that everything's hunky-dory? Well, come and live in my shoes, that's what I'd like to say to all these politicians, prime ministers that we've had. You have no perception of what it's like to live as an older person in this day and age, and to manage on the income that you have. Personally, I think we should be having a decent income. I looked online this morning, I Googled it. Some places in Europe, their pension is nearly £3,000 a month. What is it in England? £800 to £900 if you're lucky. And then on top of that, you've got all the worry of, filling in all the forms to claim for your benefits, your pension credit, etc., etc. Life is not made easy for us elders in this country. In fact, they seem to be doing everything to, push us into an early grave. Sorry, this lady's not for going.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you. Khadija, if I can ask you if you can introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, I'm really delighted to be here today. I'm CEO of Shama Women's Centre. We're based in Leicester. And has anybody heard of Shama Women's Centre? Oh, well, that's good to know. Yeah. So we're based in one of the most deprived areas in the city and nationally, it's 10% index multiple deprivation. And where we're situated is a high black, Asian minority ethnic community, and the women that we deal with suffer multiple barriers: poverty, language barriers, health inequalities, and poor education and employment. We have around 1,400 users a year. Of those, probably 600 to 700 are elderly women and people. But we do a lot of outreach work, and one of the things that's really kind of struck me I've been with the centre for 13 years, although the centre's been around for 39 years, and our services have evolved to meet the needs of the community. So we do mental health, we do befriending, we do domestic abuse, we do educational digital programmes to get women familiar with technology, and ESOL language. So various programs wrapped around the needs of that community. But for the elderly, what's really kind of struck me is that many of them don't know they've got entitlements. Many are, you talked about loneliness, that they're living in an extended family, but they're lonely in that extended family. No one's really there for them. Through our counselling service, we've had disclosures where elderly women, where their partners passed away, have been victims of abuse by their partners, but had nowhere to go, but feel saddened by the fact and guilt that they were abused. But in terms of welfare advice, and there was nowhere for them to go, and thanks to independent aid, we've been able to provide things like home visits, and many of them suffer health inequalities, disabilities, so they're housebound, and often they won't know where to go. They have language barriers, so we have multilingual staff who provide welfare advice, but also ambassadors. People who are really passionate, people like me are really passionate about making a difference to elderly people, who go out there in different languages and support them. And we've run programs out in the community so they get to hear about us. And I just want to share with you one example of many that's really kind of stuck with me. We were out in a community centre in a part of Leicester where there's a luncheon club, and this old lady came. She heard about Shama, heard that we offer advice on pensions. She had no idea. She lived in an extended family. She really ever went out because her family only gave her £10 a week to spend. So she used to go once every fortnight with a friend who would take her to the centre. She came to the centre, found out about her benefits. We actually brought her into our centre and gave her advice, and she got a pension. And the thing that she said is that because of the help that you've given me, I'm now independent. I can go out more. I can afford to go out. But for me, the most important thing is I can buy gifts for my grandchildren, and she'd never had the money to do that. So something simple, as just being there at the right time had a huge impact on her life. And there's many stories I can share with you. And one of the other factors in terms of that deprivation in Leicester is the textile industry. And it was very affluent back in the 70s and 80s, but it's declined. And for example, we had a couple walk into our centre. One elderly gentleman worked 40 years in the textiles, garment industry, and his wife. He was on end of life, and his wife was got breathing problems and disease. And they'd worked 7 days a week, £3 an hour. Never been shown. They'd never been given a pay slip because they thought that was the way it should be. And they were both in very poor conditions. And so our welfare advisor went to their house and found they were living with rot and damp all over the walls. So we, through her hard work, through the funding of independent aid, we were able to get them out of that awful condition and get them some new housing, coordinated housing. To be able to have that part of their end of life in some kind of dignity made a difference. And I have many stories. I could be here all day, but I won't do that. But yes.
Thank you very much. Anja?
It's really lovely to be here. My name's Jo. I work as one of the generalist advisors for the Independent Age Helpline. I've done that since July last year. My job, before I started here, I worked as an advisor for the RNIB, providing specialist welfare rights advice to those who've been registered sight impaired, and before that I worked as a welfare rights advisor for Macmillan. Since Independent Age got stuck with me in July last year, my job has mainly been to take helpline calls from older people throughout all 4 nations of the UK, England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, to provide support to older people, often in crisis regarding financial crisis, complete lack of knowledge or understanding of welfare benefits entitlement, support with welfare benefits issues, people in housing crisis, people experiencing homelessness, including street homelessness, and older adults needing support navigating both the incredibly complex social care and welfare rights system. I've always been quite passionate about change, but since I've started working for Independent Age, I've seen so many things that need to change for older people, just based on the number of calls we get. Like Khadija said, I don't want to keep you here all day, but I've become particularly passionate about housing for older people since we've received several calls from older people over state pension age, receiving their state pension and pension credit, who, having been made homeless, have been told by their local authority, yes, you're an older person, yes, you're over state pension age, yes, you're in your 70s, but that doesn't make you vulnerable enough to qualify for emergency housing. So I've had to deal with older adults who've been sleeping rough because they've been rejected by their local authorities for this reason. My colleague Nazmin, who isn't here today because she's working urgently on a case like this, is currently supporting a 73-year-old man who has been made street homeless, has been rejected by his local authority for this very reason, that just because he's 73, that doesn't make him vulnerable enough to qualify for emergency housing. He's currently sleeping in his car. So that is sort of one of the things I've heard sort of heartbreakingly too many times since I've started working for Independent Age, and something I'm really hoping as an organisation we can come together to change, so that older people facing homelessness and housing insecurity are not rejected from emergency accommodation for not being vulnerable enough by their local authorities there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all 3 of you. And just in case you're looking at your programme thinking there should have been a 4th person, Michael was actually supposed to be, he's an older member of International Independent Age, and he was supposed to be on the panel. But unfortunately, he actually experiences the kind of problems that you just illustrated, Joe. Unfortunately today, due to unfortunate circumstances, he can't be with us here today. He would have illustrated some of the very points you've made. But our hearts really do go out to him, and just to also apologise for his absence. Can you, Yvonne, give us a little bit more insight into, you spoke earlier about going to the shops yesterday and how the prices have changed, almost doubled just to the price of eggs. Over the past year, have you noticed any major change to either improve or worsen your situation and the challenges you're dealing with, similar to the food prices?
They've actually worsened, not only because of my physical health, but financially, everything is going up. I mean, I look at my smart meter, I've got no central heating on at the moment, but if I want hot water, I have to switch the gas boiler on. Just that alone is costing £5 a week. The electricity, I mean, what am I going to switch off? I can't switch off my fridge or the freezer that I've got. I cook with an air fryer, so I don't use my oven, and that's over £21 a week. And, you know, before all these price hikes happened, my direct debit for both gas and electric was £78 a month. That doesn't even cover the cost of the electricity alone. I mean, they want me to be paying nearly £200 a month. I can't afford that, so I've come to a compromise. I've got a good supplier, and I pay X amount, and if it's gone over that, then I have to find the extra to make up the money, so I don't get into debt with it, because I fear getting into debt. I mean, a simple thing like if your washing machine breaks down, or, you know, the fridge stops working, if I'm lucky enough, I can get a loan, but then I've got to pay that back. I haven't just got a pot of money that I can say, right, I'll take that out of that and I can buy that. It isn't there because you've got this fixed amount every week, but that's not going up every week like the prices are. And so I do despair because I feel, how are we supposed to manage? Why don't politicians of all parties understand when you have a fixed income and the prices are continually rising, all your, strategies of telling us that everything's coming, the interest rates are coming down, etc. That's not the reality of the ordinary person.
I'm just wondering, because now we're blessed with this glorious weather, but during the winter, which was particularly bitter, how did you cope? Because, we're talking now about winter fuel payments, hopefully now, increasing, but during this past winter, how have you coped?
With difficulty, because although I got the winter fuel payment, that covered 1 week in the winter when it was really cold. So the rest of the time, I have the heating on for an hour in the morning so I can go and have a shower in the warm, and an hour in the evening. The rest of the time, I'm sat there with like 3 layers of clothes on, blankets around me. I crochet, so I've usually got 2 or 3 of those to hand. And if it's really cold, when I get cold, my legs and the rest of my body are worse than what you've seen today. And I just am completely immobile, so I'll go back to bed. And that's no way. I don't want to spend the rest of my years in bed. I want to be, out there, being able to get outside and mix with other people. I mean, just going to the supermarket is a highlight for me because people in the supermarket I go to now know me, so we'll have a little chat. But when I'm really bad, I've got to have the shopping delivered.
And I'm wondering, especially picking up on something Khadija said about the loneliness experienced by some of the people you cater, look after. When you don't have enough money to spare for anything, even just to, is there any possibility for you to socialise with anybody, to say that you want to meet somebody near a cafe for a cup of tea or because I'm assuming that would also pose a challenge.
Yeah, I don't. I feel that my life, apart from when my family occasionally visit, they can't do it too often. My son travels the world with his job. My brother's in ill health and can't drive at the moment. So I feel like I'm back in isolation again, and it doesn't do my mental health any good whatsoever, being stuck on my own. I mean, I've got one very good friend, but she lives some distance from me, and she will FaceTime me 2 or 3 times a week because she worries about me because I'm on my own. Without her, I wouldn't have any human interaction. And, I feel really tearful talking about it because I'm not that sort of person. I'm a very gregarious person. The jobs I did before I retired, I worked as a receptionist, so I met hundreds of different people. And, I'm at ease with people. I can talk easily. And when that's gone, you're just left with your thoughts in your head. And that is not a good place to be.
Thank you, Yvonne. And Khadija, and thank you very much for being so frank and so open, because I know it's not easy sharing that just with the 4 of us, let alone a whole room full of people. Khadija, the kind of feelings that have been expressed by Yvonne, are these things that you come across on a regular basis?
Exactly. Mental health, what we saw this last year is more elderly women in particular suffer from poor mental health and loneliness. One of the ways we've done is kind of run digital, there's also digital poverty. Many of them have never yet to use a computer or know how to. So we've managed to get some free donations in of laptops and various things. And teaching them how to use WhatsApp so they can speak, or FaceTime. So that's kind of helped in some respects. But we also have a befriending team that actually speak different languages, who will peer up, so they've got someone to speak to, and it could be that they just go out, have a cup of coffee with them, or go to their home and meet them. So it's just breaking their week down, and it's that human interaction. That's all they need, and that improves their physical well-being as well. But our aim is to get them out of the home somehow, and bring them out, and that's what.
But even with the digital poverty, you still, because we're talking here about financial poverty, even to combat that, you still need money in order to run your smartphone. And I'm just wondering if there are many of your clients who perhaps say having a phone is something that is a luxury for them because they still have to put on their heating, they still have to cook. What are the main things that they tell you is a challenge for them?
What we do find is the majority of the women would rather don't want to be in debt, so they won't actually put the heating on, and that exacerbates ill health. And there's in terms of health inequalities, it impacts particularly people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, so they're already suffering more than probably other communities would. So this exacerbates this, and then there's a whole kind of issue of getting the support they need there. So it means everyday things that we take for granted they can't do. And we do kind of chai and chat sessions, and we do things that we can bring them out, but again it's not as often as they would like. And one of the I think it's really key for people out there in the community, if you know anybody elderly, just knock on their door and ask them if they're okay. Do you need any shopping? I think that it will just the face will light up, just to have that human interaction, and we try and do that through some of our programs.
Your grantees of independent age, in the sense that you get a sizable contribution, which now I believe is for the next 3 years.
Yes,
you'll be getting.
For us that was a major challenge. Funding as a charity was often 1 year, and it's not enough. You're just establishing the trust from the community. Again, a lot of elderly people have their self-respect and dignity, rightly so, and then it's almost like we don't want to take from you. And food banks are something unheard of 5-6 years ago for everybody, and in the communities I serve, it's no, you just don't go there. But it's a normal thing now. But yes, again, it's about that whole kind of breaking down those barriers. But it takes time to build that trust, and a lot of our referrals are through self-referral. People trust our organisation and will come to us, and they'll know that what we've done for them won't be disclosed elsewhere. It's complete confidentiality. We use Charity Link to get kind of white goods, like if somebody's washing machine's broken or whatever. So we try and do emergency grants or whatever to help them in that time. But again, it's a sticking plaster. It's not a long-term solution. And the 3-year grant, that's amazing. That's helping us to provide digital skills, language skills. And what we aim to do with that is to give both those elderly people and their carers the ability to be able to find grants and able to know what's out there, what they're entitled to, so they don't miss out. Last year, like I said, we provided something like £700,000 worth of entitlements to those people who didn't know in terms of welfare benefits, with a forecast of 1.5 million for the year. So that's money that they probably wouldn't have known about. So again, it's developing their capacity to be able to be self-reliant.
And can I ask, in terms of the people that you look after, how have they found this past year? What have they been telling you? Is it similar to the kind of experiences Yvonne has had?
I think the changes in welfare benefits with the PIP as well. It's very confusing for people out there, but all they hear is that PIP is going to be cut, and a lot of them have got disabilities. Obviously, when they're older, there's attendance allowance, but it's created this real kind of anguish and anxiety amongst people, elderly people, and it's about providing them with support. Cost of living crisis, you've explained very well, it's affecting, money's still the same, but, the cost of living's going up. It's profoundly affected mental health and ability to, just stay healthy and to manage from day to day, unfortunately.
Thank you, Khadija. Obviously, these are things that you're hearing on a day-to-day basis, Jo. What are the bulk of the calls? What are they talking to you about and other members?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I would say the bulk, and I would say 90% possibly even 95% plus of our calls are from older people in either financial or housing crisis. Not in financial or housing need, but in financial or housing crisis, needing urgent, immediate help. There's quite a few issues that do come up particularly regularly. One is the group of people, and I've touched on this before, but the group of older people who seem to be the most affected are older private renters. So there is a system with housing benefit currently where if an older person is renting a council property or a social housing property, housing benefit will rightly pay the full rent on that property. However, if they are privately renting, housing benefit will only pay a it's called the local housing allowance rate, which has never, and I speak to older people from all 4 nations in the UK, ever come anywhere near covering the full rent on a 1-bedroom property. We speak to older people who live in an area, such as mine, where realistically the minimum cost on a basic, not a fancy, but a basic 1-bedroom property in their area is £800 a month. But housing benefit, the LHA rate, will only pay £400 a month of that. So when we have older private renters having to make up almost 50% of their rental income from their basic state pension or their pension credit, and that is leaving this group in absolute poverty. We get calls from older private renters who simply, because they are having to make up the cost of their rent so much, they cannot afford their heating bills, they cannot afford their water bills, they can't afford their broadband bills, and are becoming digitally excluded. It is something I feel quite passionately the government really need to tackle. Other issues that are coming up quite regularly, and I've touched on it there, is for everybody, both older private renters and older people in general, is utility bills are rising so much. We've spoken quite a lot about energy bills, which are disgraceful, frankly, for elderly people, but we are now getting more and more calls from older people who struggle and cannot afford their water bill. With your energy bill, you do have the option of looking into changing supplier. With your water bill, you don't have that. You have your allocated supplier from where you live, and it's simply a postcode lottery. We have some older people living on a low income on pension credit where they live in an area and their water bill is £15 a month for their basic 1 or 2 bedroom property. We have other areas where an older person lives alone, lives in a 1 or 2 bedroom property, is using the identical amount of water, perhaps even less, but their water company in their area charges £60 to £70 a month, which to them, they can't understand why there's such a postcode lottery. I say they can't understand, I can't understand either. It's completely unacceptable, and that is causing a lot of issues for older people who are getting into debt with their water as well. Specifically, other issues that are coming up quite regularly is homelessness, and I touched on that we're having older people now rough sleeping because currently the law refuses to enshrine being over state pension age as automatic priority need criteria to emergency housing. And I said my colleague is actually not here today because she's dealing with an emergency of that nature that occurred late yesterday evening. We are also dealing with a lot of older people who've essentially given up their retirement to care for a loved one. It may be a partner, it may be a disabled sibling, child, or perhaps parent. And they are happy to do this, but obviously being a carer comes with a lot of extra costs. And the carers allowance system is so unclear for older people, it can confuse advisors, let alone older people who haven't claimed before and are managing this whilst caring. Currently, you cannot claim carers allowance and your state pension at the same time. Older people receive a letter, a very long letter, to tell them that they can't receive carers allowance alongside a state pension when they apply. The letter, however, does not make it explicitly clear that although they can't get a separate carers allowance, they can get a separate carer premium worth over £45 a week added onto their pension credit by being a registered carer, and separate carer premiums added onto their council tax support and housing benefit as well. And we get so many calls on the helpline. I would say probably about 6 or 7 a week from older people who say, I'm a carer, I am really struggling for money because I have extra costs. I have to pay if I need someone to look after my disabled partner. I have applied for carers allowance, but I've been told I'm not entitled because the system deliberately misleads older people into thinking there is confusing, too complex, and deliberately misleads them into thinking there isn't that entitlement to those carer premiums. And then I'd say the final thing that has come up is you've mentioned we're getting a lot of calls now because of the changes to PIP from both older people who receive PIP because they received it before state pension age, who are incredibly afraid they're going to be discriminated against and their PIP will stop, and also from older people who are now worried about making a claim for attendance allowance and automatically assume they'll be rejected because of everything they've seen in the news about disability benefits. Also, unlike personal independence payment or DLA, which is available to younger people, attendance allowance does not have a mobility component. So we can speak to older people with extremely severe mobility difficulties who will need to pay for a taxi everywhere if they want to get out and engage in the world, which they do, but because attendance allowance has a discriminatory factor where it will not pay mobility costs regardless of how severe your mobility issues are, they struggle to afford that. So I'd say those are sort of the main issues that are coming up.
I mean, I can hear the frustration. I'm sure everybody can hear the frustration and the passion in your voice, and I just wonder how you, one, calm and convince the clients that call you, but also what you can do, or and I'll open this up to all of you actually, in terms of what do you therefore hope the government can do, the policymakers do, you know, because I'm sure there's that element of frustration that it's not being done. What would you like to see happen, and what, you know, with independent age that you're actually mobilising for?
There's a few changes I'd like to see happen. A higher LHA rate that is much more in line with inflation. Local housing allowance rate, so that private renters can actually enjoy the same retirement as both people who own their own home and those renting council and housing association properties. And they do have their rental costs covered in the same way that people renting council and social housing properties do. I personally, I can't speak for independent age, but I personally would like to see a cap on water bills in all areas for older people on a low income, because nobody in the 21st century in a developed country should be struggling or worrying about paying their water bill or their energy bills. I would like to see immediate changes to homelessness legislation so that anyone state pension age or over who is homeless or facing street homelessness is automatically entitled to emergency accommodation, so we do not get calls any longer from older people who are rough sleeping. I would like to see a mass sort of marketing campaign explaining to older people who are carers very clearly the financial support and carer premiums they're entitled to, and the government and the DWP to support with that. And I think also I'd really like to see in general older renters, particularly private renters, being given more protection there.
Khadija, I think was...
I agree entirely with what you're saying, but I think look at the communities that we deal with. On top of that, you've got the language barriers, literacy barriers, digital barriers. I think it's about the government presenting that information in an easy, wider, diverse format that's going to be applicable to the communities of this country, minoritized communities in particular, so that they do understand. And you know, the voluntary sector organisations are used to promote that in a way that's going to be meaningful and reach those communities, because people are entitled and they're not claiming because they don't know about it.
And even I wonder if there are enough people who even know, and Yvonne, I wonder how you got to know about independent age in the first place, because there are so many hundreds of thousands who don't even know that independent age exists, or there are so many, more importantly, who don't even know the attendance allowance exists, and they have no idea knowing that they can even claim it. How do you get that message across? How did you, for instance, hear about it?
Well, I do my best to advertise it as much as I can. I mean, I've even had conversations with people in the supermarket queue, older people that are maybe, I can tell they're struggling because they're searching in their purse for enough money to pay. and I'll give them a pen with the free phone number on from Independent Age, or a leaflet sometimes I'll have in my bag. And I also have made my friends are all, say, you know, coming up to 20 years younger than me, so I'm putting them in the know. And I have a friend now, sadly her mother's passed, but she wasn't aware that her mother could get help. She could get, you know, not disability, but, you know, attendance allowance. And I said to her, you need to get social services involved, because her mother was really incapacitated and had very little mobility at all. And she said, well, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have got these things for Mummy before she died. You know, and it made her life that much easier. And I think this is a problem. So much of it is kept secret. Why? You know, it's entitlement, and particularly when you're older, you've paid into the system all your working life. Why are they keeping it a secret from you, that you're now entitled to things to make life easier when you're older?
Yes, Khadija, how do you get the word out there? You know, just hearing some of the things, you know, the calls that Joe feels. How do people know to come to you?
What works really well are videos, WhatsApp. We've got WhatsApp groups and videos that go out to a lot of our partner networks, and also to individuals. So different groups of women on different WhatsApp. So many of them are carers for the elderly, and that's another area we target in terms of supporting the carers, so they know how to access those benefits. They know what their loved one's entitled to. That's also a part of the Independent Age programme we're doing, is educating the carers as well. So we get the message out that way. We use local radio, we use our networks in the community to go out there and do our outreach work where these elderly people are likely to be. Because of why the majority, it's word of mouth, and once you tell one, the word passes around, and the majority of ours are through word of mouth.
I'm going to open it to the floor in a second, but before I do, if you each had something you want members of the audience to take home with them, one key message, what would it be from each of you?
I think for me, it's if you do have older family members who are family or friends or neighbours, absolutely encourage them to get a full benefit check, ideally from us at Independent Age, because we support anyone in the UK, but from anywhere, because so many times we do speak to older people who say, you know, I just phoned your number by chance, came out of a leaflet in a magazine, I didn't expect to be entitled to anything, but here I am, I'm actually found out I'm entitled to another £120, £150 a week. There is a lot of focus on pension credit and people being entitled to pension credit, but there's other support as well, such as attendance allowance, council tax support, council tax exemptions, housing benefit, that isn't as widely sort of known to the public. So I'd really strongly say, absolutely, if you know any older person, encourage them with a full benefit check. Many people think owning their own home, having any savings whatsoever, not having a disability means they won't be entitled to anything, but it's always best to check to make sure as many people as possible, as many older people as possible, are claiming what they're entitled to, so hopefully they can live life to the fullest there.
Thank you, Khadija.
Right, I think the key thing is really to get the message out there. A lot of elderly people are in hospital, so if you're visiting in hospital, speak to the patient on the bed next to your loved one. Get the message out. The more you talk about it, the more people will be aware of it, and unless we do that, those entitlements are never going to reach the people they're meant for, the elderly they're meant for.
Yvonne, the best till last. What message would you have?
Mine's along similar lines. I want you to take away what you've heard today and spread it amongst your communities so that people are aware that not, as most people seem to think, pensioners are well off. You know, the opposite is true in the vast majority of cases. And also to raise awareness about the loneliness for the elders in the community, not just the youngsters. I mean, you know, we're past the age where we want to go out raving or, you know, down the pub for a drink. It's a human need to have human contact. And if you can spread that about, make people more aware of it, you're helping the change, because one voice grows into many.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now if I can open it up to the audience. I mean, one thing that I know really hit home for me, and I know it would take the whole morning, is when you talked about the older couple who had been paid £3 an hour for decades. I mean, is that even lawful? Is it legal in this country? I'm sure it's illegal. I don't actually. Yeah. So please have your questions ready. Is there anybody who already has a question? Because if not, then if you could answer that question. But if there are any hands, because I don't see any on Slido, if anybody has a question, please do raise your hand. The Slido, you can use the code 3602207. Sorry, I thought it was on the board. It's can you all see the QR code? You can all? Okay. Oh, there are questions now coming up. Okay, what is the single most significant policy change the government could make which could help you or the older people you support? Khadija?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is housing that is not fit for human habitation for elderly people with health issues particularly. Build more houses, more social housing for the elderly.
And there's another question for you, Khadija. What do you think is the most helpful for the communities you work with?
The fact that you've got people that you can communicate with in a language that you understand, who'll go out of their way, they'll come and visit you at home, they'll be flexible to meet your needs. I think that's really important, and when they come to us, it's not just that they don't feel like they're a tick box. They feel like they're being supported. We're putting their arms around them. We're making them feel part of a family and that we care as a community. And that's really important. It's down to that feeling lonely and not a sense of not belonging. Yes, you are important. Your welfare does matter. We are here for you, and you can trust us. And that's the kind of approach we use.
And it's something you touched on before, Khadija, but I'll ask you to answer it first, Jo, and then come back to you, Khadija, about this issue of stigma. People being so proud. I know even my neighbour is the same thing. He was, suffering for a long time before we realised how he was, and then we reached out. But how much is it that people hold themselves back because they have this stigma, Jo?
I'd say an awful lot. We speak to people who say, basically, it's taken me weeks, months to even sort of rev myself up to call, because I am embarrassed. I've always, when I was working, supported myself. Very often, they say, I'm sure there's people, and this is normally people living in quite severe poverty, who say this, don't worry, don't go to too much trouble, I'm sure there's people who need this much more than me. And I do think that's why having a phone line and a helpline is so important, because for some people, the stigma is so much, they don't feel they could walk into their local citizens' advice or a local face-to-face agency, whereas with a phone line, they do feel that slight, for some people, it works for them. For others, face-to-face settings work better. For some people, that privacy and knowing that no one can overhear their conversation, and that their help and advice and casework support is being delivered remotely, directly to their own home, but with sort of the barrier of a phone line, the feedback we've had has been helpful to many older people who do feel such stigma from asking. I think it would be really nice if we could do all we could to quash that stigma, because the fact that stigma exists often puts older people off from phoning us till they've reached absolute crisis point financially. So if we could break that down and it would take some time, but shift that attitude, it would be really good, because hopefully then we could get older people the help and support they need before they reach financial crisis.
And Khadija, is it the same? And if I can expand it slightly, it's a two-part. In terms of this question that people are supporting, that the stigma around older people, reaching out, but also within your community, is there also this feeling of they might get a backlash from other family members if they do?
I think it's very much an expectation in the communities that I serve, is that it's the son's duty to look after his parents, and sadly they're afraid that their son might find out. We get cases of domestic abuse, financial abuse, and we deal with them confident, and they're disclosed. So we do it in such a way that we help those elderly people set up their own bank accounts, so they've got some financial resilience. And we do try and bring the family in where we think it's not going to be put that individual at risk. There is that stigma, you know, you're supposed to care, you're not supposed to get paid for it. And what we're saying, but if it's going to make your parents' life better, it's going to help you meet their needs, and there's nothing wrong with this, nothing shameful in it. So attitudes are changing, but slowly, and it's through education and through saying, this, you know, this is here. And the other thing is dementia. This is affecting the communities, the Black, Asian minority ethnic communities, but there's a complete denial. It's a bit like the mental health. Back in 2012, I pioneered a mental health service for culturally conducive service for the community, and there was a complete taboo on it. That's now grown and grown and grown. The same with dementia and the elderly. It's still a taboo, and we're trying to work with the NHS partners to break that down, to also say what help is out there. So it's about talking and, you know, making sure people know where to go for support, and saying it's okay to do that. It's okay. You know, it's not a you're not having a begging bowl out. You're accessing something that's right for you and your family, you and your loved ones.
Thank you. Is there anybody who has a question from the floor? No? Okay, I'll ask. The question that is something that you raised, Joe, also, but if I can put it to you first, Yvonne, is that issue of water rates and water bills. How much of a problem is it for you? You've already talked about how you struggle with, you know, your utilities with energy, but what about water?
Well, my water bill has gone up 2.5 times to what it was, and quite frankly, I don't know what else I can do. I have got an economy wash on my washing machine, so all my clothes get washed on that. You know, I don't do any long cycles. I follow Martin Lewis, and if it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. And that's about all you can do. And, you know, I do drink a lot of water, but I'm sorry, I'm staying hydrated. So, yes, I think it's awful. I mean, I'm on my own. I don't do an awful lot of washing. It's maybe 4 loads, and I do them all on the same day, so it's just one time. And I'm with one of the worst water companies that you obviously realise, Thames, and they don't give you any discount. They don't want to help in any way because I've rung them up. And I just feel, you know, after what they've done and the millions they've given away to shareholders, the millions or the hundreds of thousands that the top guy gets paid, this country needs to wake up. You know, it's time for a cap to be put on these people's wages, and if they don't perform, their wages get taken away and they lose their job. That's what I'd do.
Thank you, Joe. Because you spoke earlier about, you know, the water rates. What would you like to see happen, or what are some of your clients telling you?
So what the message we're getting from older people is, I've sort of had letters since April, the water bill has risen ridiculously. I cannot afford to pay this, but I'm obviously nervous of the consequences and the credit consequences if I don't pay, and cutting back in other very, very basic areas, such as just going out, paying for food because they feel the water bill is an absolute essential. What I'd like to see, and what I believe should be in place, is water is an essential. So for anybody really of any age on income-related benefits, be that pension credit for older people, universal credit for younger people, there to be all water companies, regardless of the area of the UK, must give a discount, the same discount, so it's not a postcode lottery for anyone on a low income, so that no one on a low income, be they an older adult or someone of working age, struggles to afford their water costs anymore there. But yeah, I do think it's particularly relevant to older people, because a lot of older people they're retired, so they're at home more, so they are using more water, and they obviously they might have health conditions, which means they're doing laundry or needing to wash more frequently there. But I think all water companies, regardless of where they are in the UK, should be obligated to have the same generous discount for anyone on a low income there.
Khadija, you look as if you want to say something.
Well, I think, yeah, water is part of it. We help women and elderly people understand the water bill and what it means and what a water meter is and smart meter and all these things are technology. Most of the elderly people we deal with don't understand it. So we do a bit of an education, explaining to them and how we can help them save money on water. And it is difficult, it is a struggle.
I was just wondering, especially because you're in Leicester, in terms of the intergenerational households, if there are particular financial pressures within the house, with some of the older people that you say have been working for generations, do they contribute that to the general pot? Is there a general pot? Or I know different households are different, but I was just curious if there's any...
Every situation is different, and we only get disclosures through our counsellor, mental health counsellors, through our domestic abuse counsellors, through our welfare advice. Every story is difficult, but what you're finding now is a lot of the third generation going out to work, because couples have to work. So the elderly person staying at home, they're doing the cooking. There's cases, sadly, over the past 6 months, I've seen at least 5 cases where an elderly parent has been thrown out of the family home, and that was unheard of in the communities that we deal with. And we've had to try and find a house and try and negotiate with the family, and it brings tears to your eyes. How can a daughter do that to a mother? And there's lots of pressures for those siblings as well, because they're trying to make ends meet, low-paid jobs, children, to manage. So there's lots of pressures there, and I think the lockdown, if I may mention that, exacerbated a lot of those issues that we're now still dealing with today.
Well, I have to say thank you very much. It's been riveting hearing from all 3 of you. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Khadija. And thank you, Jo. And thank you to everyone else.
Can't give my glass back. Thank you.
I'll take that.
Break now for a comfort break and a quick cup of tea. And if you could be back here at 10:02, that would be terrific. Thanks so much, everyone. Let's show our appreciation in the usual way. Welcome back, everybody. Can I encourage you to take your seats? We're just about to start again. Thanks so much for making that a brief break. And I'm going to welcome you back. So if everyone can take their seats, that would be terrific. Thanks so much. And I want to start by thanking again our lived experience panel. How powerful was that? And I feel so fortunate that we have amazing volunteers who are willing to talk about their personal experiences. Never an easy thing to do. It isn't Yvonne an absolute star? We've also got amazing grants recipients who connect us, all of us, to communities up and down the country that we wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. So thank you to Khadija. And of course, our fantastic colleagues like Jo, who talk day in and day out to people and hear their stories and are able to share that evidence with us so that we can make the case for change. And that's a great backdrop, I think, for the session we're going to hear from now. So I'm going to introduce in just a moment Andy Harrop, who's sitting just in the front here. Andy will be known to many of you. Andy's from Public First, but before that, running the Fabian Society with Age UK and in a variety of other important roles. And Andy's going to talk to us about polling that's been done recently. We commissioned this research amongst 2,000 adults across the UK to find out what they thought about poverty in later life. And I mean, spoiler alert, but we were really impressed and surprised perhaps to hear that most of the public agree with us that pensioner poverty is a real issue. So I'm going to introduce Andy and ask him to give us the detail of that, and then we're going to have an exercise where we all explore that a little bit and reflect on what we've heard. So Andy, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. We at Public First, we were delighted to be asked by Independent Age to do this piece of polling of, as we've just heard, 2,000 adults looking at people's views on poverty in later life. I'm going to start with, yes, the contents we're going to cover. I should say Public First is a policy and research consultancy. Most of the hard work on this project was done by my colleagues Tom Hamilton and Elle Gray. We asked about the general population's views on poverty in later life, whether it was a priority, how they thought the government was getting on the topic of poverty in later life, and we looked at some specific policies, including the winter fuel payment. I should say that this polling was done in April, just before the U-turn from the government on winter fuel payment, which we'll get to later on. So first of all, where do older people in poverty rank as an issue amongst public concerns? The public are concerned about older people in poverty. Let me tell you what this slide is showing in a question that we asked people. Would you say that these are significant issues for the UK? And we gave a bunch of important topical issues, including older people in poverty. And what you can see here is it's not the top issue, but it's very significant. So 1 in 3 adults said that older people living in poverty was a significant issue facing the UK, and almost 4 in 5 said it was either a significant or somewhat of an issue facing the UK. So a really broad range of the public think this matters. And particularly important, you have a wide cross-section of age groups thinking this matters. So what you see here is slightly higher numbers of older people and people towards the end of their working life think this matters, but still very, very high numbers of younger adults too. Most under 45s are concerned about older people in poverty as an issue. Delving into a little bit more detail, the public prioritise older people in poverty as a sort of a concern that they want politicians to be dealing with. This is a messy, sort of complicated, sorry, I haven't even shown you the chart yet. Right, okay, so this is a complicated chart to look at, so I'll just walk you through it. There are 2 bars that we're showing you here, a yellow one and a red one, and they're asking 2 different questions. But the headline, the real takeaway here, is that older people in poverty is the top priority coming out on both these questions. The first one was, would you be willing to pay more in taxes if it meant better support for this group of people? And the second question, the red bars, is if there was an election tomorrow, how much would the different political parties' policies towards the following groups influence your vote? And higher means that it's a higher priority for the public. So the reason we ask these slightly different questions is it's sort of a different way into particularly the question about would you be personally willing to pay taxes towards support for this group. And what you can see is that this is even more of a priority than families with children in poverty, and basically other different demographic groups are seen as less important and less worthy of spending taxpayer money on than, as you see, number 1, older people in poverty, number 2, families with children in poverty. And then following on from that, so that was where people personally prioritise, and this is where they think the government should prioritise. And not surprisingly, they think, having said it's a priority for themselves personally, they also think the government should prioritise older people in poverty. It's flipped this time, so you'll see on this question it's families and children first and older people second, but the exact numbers don't matter nearly so much as that older people are right at the top of the list. So that's where people's personal views of, is this a priority issue? We also asked what adults in general think of the lives of older people. And the first question we asked here, which has just come up, is, in your opinion, do most older people have it better or worse off than other people in the UK? So this is this question that the media often tries to sort of play up, that sense that, there's different generations, some lucky, some not. But what you see here is that more adults think older people are worse off than better off across 3 questions. So we asked, are they worse off in general? Are they worse off in terms of financial security? and are they worse off in terms of living standards? And on those three questions, more adults think that they're worse off, that older people are worse off than think they're better off. The only one where a majority think that older people are better off is in ownership of homes, which is borne out by the reality. We also asked about how people perceive the lives of older people, and this sort of picks up some of the themes we heard in the previous session. And basically, we've got pairs of statements, so for example, sociable and isolated, or independent versus dependent. And what you see here is, of those pairs of statements, the more negative is seen as more representative or descriptive of older people's lives than the more positive. Now, I think there could be a bit of ageism creeping in here, so it's not necessarily a pure sort of reflection of reality. There's also, I think, people having diminished expectations of aging as an experience in this answer. We finally, on this section, asked about what people think is to blame for the costs of living, what's to blame for poverty, and the cost of living comes overwhelmingly the top reason people think that poverty has been rising for older people in recent years. So I'm now going to move on to how big a priority do you think older people in poverty is for the government? And having seen it was a top priority for the public, it's basically seen as a mid-level priority for the government. So it's not right at the bottom. So we can see older people in poverty is the first blue line, and then lower down we've got older people in general and retired adults. So it's not bottom, but it's not seen as top either. Then this question was, to what extent has the Labour government prioritised helping the following groups? And you can see that we've asked a very wide range of different groups in society. Interestingly, older people themselves are least likely to think that the government has prioritised older people in poverty. So you can see you've got, with the younger age groups up to 45-year-olds, you've got quite a large number thinking that older people in poverty has been a priority for this government. But when you actually look at over 65s, less than 1 in 5 think that older people in poverty has been a priority for this government. Adults in general, also think that older people in poverty have been worst hit by the government's decisions so far. So this question, we asked how the following groups have been impacted by the Labour government's decisions, and the yellow side is the percentage of adults who think that that group has been negatively impacted, and the red side is the percentage who think that that group have been positively impacted. So what you can see again, we've got older people in poverty as the top of this set of bars, which means that they are the group who adults in general think have been worse impacted so far by the new government. And that takes me to winter fuel payment, which is the specific area we obviously looked at back in April, not realising that the government was about to do this U-turn. And this chart really shows you why that U-turn happened and was so important. So we asked adults to rate a number of policies that this government has introduced and asked them what their impact on older people was. So to what extent do you expect the following policies to be good or bad or make no difference to people over the age of 65? And you can see right at the top, there are a couple where people think that that would make a really positive difference. One was extra NHS treatments, and the second one down is reforms to renters' rights, which I think was mentioned earlier. And then there's a bunch, most of the policies we tested here, most people think they'll make no difference either way. And then right at the bottom, we have winter fuel payments, and we have 7 in 10 adults thinking it's either bad or very bad for older people. It also ranks, of the policies we tested, by far the least popular policy introduced. Again, this may not come as any surprise to you, but we asked, since coming to power, the UK Labour government has introduced the following policies. Please indicate to what extent you support or oppose these policies. So you can see lots of these policies have wide public support. And it's really only the last two at the bottom. One of them is the increase in employers' national insurance, and then last, right at the bottom of the list, 7 in 10 adults saying they either strongly or somewhat oppose the winter fuel payment policy. And so, as I say, that's why the government felt it needed to act. And what did people think about the solution that the government has come up with? Well, by good fortune, we polled it before they introduced it as a solution, and it was the public's top preference. So the option we have here is to restore winter fuel payment, winter fuel allowance for all pensioners except the top 10%, which is basically what they've introduced. They've introduced this £35,000 limit. After that, you have it withdrawn through your tax. And you interestingly see that this solution, which had support as plus 57, the way these net support figures works is that it's basically those who support minus those who don't support something, so it gives you a net figure. And interestingly, that is more popular than going back to the status quo, which is the bottom option here, which is restore winter fuel payments for all pensioners, regardless of income. So more people support the solution that the government has actually arrived at than going all the way back to the original policy we had in place last summer. And then finally, I want to just go through a couple of slides talking about policies to support older people that are popular or not popular, looking forward. So what could happen next? And we've got here a group of policies that are all very popular. Although I've got them in order of polling, I mean, the takeaway here is these are all plus 70% public support. So that means a lot more people are saying that they support something, very, very few are saying they oppose something. And the things you've got here is a strategy for improving the state pension, action on social care, action to make sure that benefits in the pension are sufficient to avoid poverty, and then on the cost of living, so bills, energy, water, and housing. People want to see policies in all these areas. On the other side, there are a lot of things that they don't support in terms of negative policies that would, by and large, harm older people. Most of these, we actually had a discussion a few minutes ago about attendance allowance. People don't want to see attendance allowance tightened in its assessment criteria. They don't want to see it means tested. And you'll see we also have strong views on the triple lock. Although two different questions mention the triple lock in slightly different ways and have different degrees of hostility too, which is interesting in terms of, like, I think a government would have more support if it didn't just scrap the triple lock, but it had a good alternative to it than just getting rid of it. It's worth saying on this slide that there is one policy that is extremely unpopular, which is government policy, and that's to increase the state pension age. So it was our second least popular policy, and of course we have another state pension rise just coming, and further likely in decades ahead. So that is a another sort of tension point between what government is planning and where public opinion is. But as you'll see, a lot of these future policy areas, the popular ones, are things where, you know, basically action is needed to address poverty, and it's not only necessary, but it's also very popular. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Andy. That was so insightful, wasn't it? I learnt a lot and so interesting. Morgan and I have been doing some media interviews over the last couple of days, a lot of them with with radio stations across the UK, so in very specific bits. And you get a real sense as you listen to some of those people phoning into the radio station what their views are. And it does feel to me comparing with a year ago when we did something similar, that there is more understanding now, there is more support, public support for older people in poverty. So just interesting to compare that. We're going to reflect a little bit on what we've heard now, so that we're going to sit on the 8 tables. We've got 8 facilitators. I'm going to run through who they are and get them to wave at us. And then if you're not sitting at one of those tables, if you would please move so that you are, then we can move on. So I'll tell you who those are, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing. So please, can the following facilitators stand up and give us a wave? So first of all, Isabel Roberts. Where's Isabel? There she is. Yep, thank you very much, Isabel. Then we've got Sophia. There's Sophia over there. Then we've got Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. We've got Adam. Lovely, thanks, Adam. Where's Gabriel? Got Gabriel, yeah, Gabriel's over there. We've got Kay. Where's Kay? There's Kay at the back there. We've got Nicola Upton, there we are, there's Nicola. And then we've got Margaret, who's one of our wonderful ambassadors. Where's Margaret? Here's Margaret here. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you all to move to one of the tables you've just seen someone waving at you from. So just to say, what we're going to do over the next about 30 minutes is to consider what we've heard from Andy and talk about 3 things. What organisations could do differently to better support older people living on a low income? Secondly, if there's anything we think is still hidden and we'd like the public to be more aware of about poverty in later life. And then finally, what actions we can all take to support those people who are in financial hardship. Now, we won't be taking official notes for these sessions because we want you to be able to speak really freely about what you think and bounce around ideas that might not be fully formed. But if you do come up with something that you think, is going to be key, then do please make a note of it on the action board that's going to be in the lunch room shortly. So, without further ado, I'm going to leave you to move to your slots, and then I'll bring you back together in about half an hour's time. Thanks.
I had a wedding dress business and it was doing quite well. We had the occasional bridezilla, of course, but for the first time since the divorce, I had money in the bank and I'd made it all myself. I was looking forward to the future. Then, lockdown. My income disappeared overnight and suddenly I had a lot more going out than coming in. I tried to keep it going as long as possible, but in the end, the business had to close. My life just kind of spiraled down from there. I lost the house. No one would give me a job. I'm sure they thought I was too old. It meant all I had to live on was my state pension. I'm living with my daughter now, but I feel like such a burden. I want to be independent and get my own place, but I can't see how. I don't know what help there is out there for people like me. I feel so stressed and ashamed.
Hello, you're through to the Independent Age Helpline. My name's Sarah. How can I help you?
It was such a relief to hear a friendly voice. Sarah listened to me and calmed me right down. I told her I'd been working since I was 14 years old and I never in my life imagined I'd be talking to a charity. But she said more and more retired people are struggling because of the cost of living and housing problems. She pointed me in the right direction and helped me to apply for housing benefit and pension credit. I looked round a small flat the other day. I haven't moved in yet, but for the first time in ages, I can see a future again. I had a wedding dress business and it was doing quite well. We had the occasional bridezilla, of course. But for the first time since the divorce, I had money in the bank and I'd made it all myself. I was looking forward to the future. Then, lockdown. My income disappeared overnight and suddenly I had a lot more going out than coming in. I tried to keep it going as long as possible, but in the end the business had to close. My life just kind of spiraled down from there. I lost the house. No one would give me a job. I'm sure they thought I was too old. It meant all I had to live on was my state pension. I'm living with my daughter now, but I feel like such a burden. I want to be independent and get my own place, but I can't see how. I don't know what help there is out there for people like me. I feel so stressed and ashamed.
Hello, you're through to the Independent Age Helpline. My name's Sarah. How can I help you?
It was such a relief to hear a friendly voice. Sarah listened to me and calmed me right down. I told her I'd been working since I was 14 years old and I never in my life imagined I'd be talking to a charity. But she said more and more retired people are struggling because of the cost of living and housing problems. She pointed me in the right direction and helped me to apply for housing benefit and pension credit. I looked round a small flat the other day. I haven't moved in yet, but for the first time in ages, I can see a future again.
Neil was captain of the cricket team. He always said I was his most difficult catch. We had a lovely life together with our boy, Joe. Neil worked so hard to give us a good life. And when Joe grew up, I worked as a teaching assistant. The kids were great, most of the time. Everything was good. Until Neil had the stroke. I had to leave my job to care for him, and I won't lie, it's hard. He's there, but he's not there. I can't get out. I've never been more alone. Last winter I had to keep the heating on for him, and with the price of everything now, all our savings have gone. We're in debt for the first time in our lives. I'm finding it hard to sleep with all this worry. Life is just one long, dark tunnel. I mean, I'm getting close to thinking it's just not worth either of us living any longer.
Hello, you're through to the Independent Age Helpline. My name's Kim. How can I help?
I was just so relieved. It was so nice to offload a bit because I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to get through each day. Kim talked to me about benefits we might be entitled to, such as attendance allowance, carer's allowance and pension credit. I had no idea that any of this even existed, or that we might be able to claim it. No one tells you, do they? I'm waiting for some decisions, but we've already got some extra money each week for attendance allowance, and that makes a real difference. For the first time since the stroke, it feels like there might be light at the end of the tunnel.
Independent Age is in Westminster today with a lot of different organisations, including Organise, 38 Degrees, Silver Voices, the National Pensioners Convention, the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, delivering petitions to the UK government that total 500,000 signatures, calling on the UK government to not means test the winter fuel payment now.
Many older people are going to really struggle this winter. People choosing between heating and eating, people losing out on significant amount of money for them that could really make things easier.
We are disagreeing with this because there are so many elderly people who live on the poverty line as it is, who need as much help as they can get.
People are desperate. We've had numerous people contacting us saying they just don't know what they were going to do.
So many people are going to have so much hardship this winter as a result of that cut, my partner included.
It's not only campaigning for today's pensioners, it's the pensioners of tomorrow.
We really hope that the government will pause, they'll take stock and they'll think this is not the time to make this change that's going to adversely affect so many older people.
Independent Age is in Westminster today with a lot of different organisations, including Organise, 38 Degrees, Silver Voices, the National Pensioners Convention, the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, delivering petitions to the UK government that total 500,000 signatures, calling on the UK government to not means test the winter fuel payment now.
Many older people are going to really struggle this winter. People choosing between heating and eating, people losing out on significant amount of money for them that could really make things easier.
We are disagreeing with this because there are so many elderly people who live on the poverty line as it is, who need as much help as they can get.
People are desperate. We've had numerous people contacting us saying they just don't know what they were going to do.
So many people are going to have so much hardship this winter as a result of that cut, my partner included.
It's not only campaigning for today's pensioners, it's the pensioners of tomorrow.
We really hope that the government will pause, they'll take stock and they'll think this is not the time to make this change that's going to adversely affect so many older people.
Independent Age is in Westminster today with a lot of different organisations, including Organise, 38 Degrees, Silver Voices, the National Pensioners Convention, the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, delivering petitions to the UK government that total 500,000 signatures, calling on the UK government to not means test the winter fuel payment now.
Many older people are going to really struggle this winter. People choosing between heating and eating, people losing out on significant amount of money for them that could really make things easier.
We are disagreeing with this because there are so many elderly people who live on the poverty line as it is, who need as much help as they can get.
People are desperate. We've had numerous people contacting us saying they just don't know what they were going to do.
So many people are going to have so much hardship this winter as a result of that cut, my partner included.
It's not only campaigning for today's pensioners, it's the pensioners of tomorrow.
We really hope that the government will pause, they'll take stock and they'll think this is not the time to make this change that's going to adversely affect so many older people.
Independent Age is in Westminster today with a lot of different organisations, including Organise, 38 Degrees, Silver Voices, the National Pensioners Convention, the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, delivering petitions to the UK government that total 500,000 signatures, calling on the UK government to not means test the winter fuel payment now.
Many older people are going to really struggle this winter. People choosing between heating and eating, people losing out on significant amount of money for them that could really make things easier.
We are disagreeing with this because there are so many elderly people who live on the poverty line as it is, who need as much help as they can get.
People are desperate. We've had numerous people contacting us saying they just don't know what they were going to do.
So many people are going to have so much hardship this winter as a result of that cut, my partner included.
It's not only campaigning for today's pensioners, it's the pensioners of tomorrow.
We really hope that the government will pause, they'll take stock and they'll think this is not the time to make this change that's going to adversely affect so many older people.
Independent Age is in Westminster today with a lot of different organisations, including Organised, 38 Degrees, Silver Voices, National Pensions Convention.
For older people and ageing.
There's a common misconception that all my generation are well off and spending their later life on nice cruises.
For many, that may be true, but
the hidden reality is that over 2 million people over the age of 65 live in poverty.
And many more face financial hardship.
a silent struggle to make ends meet.
The cost of living crisis is making this struggle harder and harder to survive.
Living in poverty plays on your mind all day, every day.
Living in poverty impacts relationships, health and well-being.
Many of my generation feel invisible and powerless.
Growing old in the UK shouldn't mean not being able to afford the most basic essentials.
Like food, health and a warm home.
It's trying to ensure everyone can feel part of our society.
That's why we are asking the government to create a commissioner for older people and aging.
A champion who can ensure the range of voices and experience in later life are heard now and in the future.
Everyone in my generation has a voice,
and our voices need to be heard. My generation, well, we've seen a lot, we've been through a lot, and we're still here, thank goodness.
We support the older people's poverty charity Independent Age in calling for a commissioner for older people and ageing.
There's a common misconception that all my generation are well off and spending their later life on nice cruises.
For many, that may be true, but
the hidden reality is that over 2 million people over the age of 65 live in poverty.
And many more face financial hardship.
a silent struggle to make ends meet.
The cost of living crisis is making this struggle harder and harder to survive.
Living in poverty plays on your mind all day, every day.
Living in poverty impacts relationships, health and well-being.
Many of my generation feel invisible and powerless.
Growing old in the UK shouldn't mean not being able to afford the most basic essentials.
Like food, health and a warm home.
It's trying to ensure everyone can feel part of our society.
That's why we are asking the government to create a commissioner for older people and aging.
A champion who can ensure the range of voices and experience in later life are heard now and in the future.
Everyone in my generation has a voice,
and our voices need to be heard. My generation, well, we've seen a lot, we've been through a lot, and we're still here, thank goodness.
We support the older people's poverty charity Independent Age in calling for a commissioner for older people and ageing.
There's a common misconception that all my generation are well off and spending their later life on nice cruises.
For many, that may be true, but
the hidden reality is that over 2 million people over the age of 65 live in poverty.
And many more face financial hardship.
a silent struggle to make ends meet.
The cost of living crisis is making this struggle harder and harder to survive.
Living in poverty plays on your mind all day, every day.
Living in poverty impacts relationships, health and well-being.
Many of my generation feel invisible and powerless.
Growing old in the UK shouldn't mean not being able to afford the most basic essentials.
Like food, health and a warm home.
It's trying to ensure everyone can feel part of our society.
That's why we are asking the government to create a commissioner for older people and aging.
A champion who can ensure the range of voices and experience in later life are heard now and in the future.
Everyone in my generation has a voice, and our voices need to be heard.
My gen-
We're here as part of
Call you back to order. Hello again, Hello again, everybody. I'm going to call you back to order. Sorry, that went quickly, didn't it, that time? And just, I was on one of the tables, but earwigging on some of the others. Some really fantastic conversations, really getting into the detail. So thank you very much for that. So just a quick reminder to put your pledges on the pledge board over lunch. Leanne, who's our lovely photographer, will be taking your photograph if you'd like to at the photo wall during the lunch period. Do enjoy your lunch and conversations, and we'll see you back here, please, at 1:30. Thanks so much.